Okay. Good morning, everyone. Hope you all had a wonderful break and holiday for those that partook. And so today we're going to talk about tips and tricks for winning in the winter market. Now, I don't have any slides because I want this to be conversation based. But before we even get there, Katrin had a great question right at the start that I wanted to wait until I hit record to answer. Katrin mentioned a few of our listings for the office have come back on market, and she asked for tips or strategies around maybe identifying red flags or even call them yellow or orange flags or possible concerns to avoid that happening sooner, whether it be at the offer stage or even during the negotiation stage. And I thought this was a great question, and I wanted to record it because I think it's applicable to a lot of us in our business. Now, this is going to particularly be talking from the listing side. Some of the stuff I say will apply if you're representing a buyer, and some of the tips and tricks we talk about later will also play into this effect. So, when you're representing a seller and you are under contract already, it is almost always more profitable or a better sale in the long run to keep that contract intact, even if you have to negotiate a little bit more than you expected to. I was just talking before we hit record about a current transaction that I'm dealing with where the inspection repairs is getting a little wonky or a little messy. And it would still probably make more sense for my sellers to take the credit that has been asked for by the buyers and keep this deal intact and continue proceeding to closing than it would be to let the deal fall apart and to go back on market. Even if you go back on the market and you're representing a seller at no fault of the seller, which we'll see all the times in the remarks, the buyer perception or the market perception is still that something is wrong with the house. Even if there's not something wrong with the house, that is still the perception. Now, put my broker hat on for a second. If you are representing a seller and you cannot come to an agreement over inspection, negotiation, repairs, and you have seen that inspection report, you are supposed to disclose any material defects going back to your licensing test. The other option would be to fix them. So if you cannot come to an agreement on repairs based on what needs to be fixed, you still need to disclose those repairs or make the inspection report available to any prospective buyer. Hence why it's typically better off to continue with the current transaction rather than go back on the market. Now, put my coaching salesperson hat back on. This almost never happens. Most agents will not do this the correct way, which is one of those potential red flags that you can come across. Is if the house has been back on the market, you should do your due diligence to try to find out all the info as to why. Some agents will not tell you that. However, if you get them on the phone, they will typically tell you more than they would over text or email because they don't want to put it in writing. Keep that in mind. Now, at the offer stage, when you're representing a seller, one of the ways that you can protect your client's best interest is to look for the strong points of the offer. Now, what are those? Number one, deposit. We typically want to see a deposit in the amount of 1% of the sales price. You should put that as a part of the MLS listing. If you get something a little bit less than 1%, have a conversation with your sellers. You can also ask the lender what the cash available to the buyer is. Now, they might not directly tell you. Another way of asking that would be when you get the offer, you call the lender and say, do you have any concerns with this buyer? How is their cash availability? How is their qualifications profile? Are they strongly qualified? Have they been through automatic underwriting? These are practices that you should get in the habit of doing regardless of the seller or the listing situation. You should always call the lender if there is one and ask for their input. Most lenders will tell you, oh, it's great, strong qualified buyer. I've worked with them before. They're great. They're easy. It'll be a slam dunk. They're not going to necessarily say it's going to be a bad thing. But sometimes you get some red flags there. Now, if the deposit is less than $1,000, I don't care what the list price is, that's usually an orange flag or a red flag. I've told this story on here before. I had a listing back in the spring. We got a full price offer of $580, and the buyer was putting down a $500 deposit. I called the agent and said, hey, what's up with this $500 deposit? Did you forget a zero on the contract? And she said, no, my buyer has already backed out of 3 deals. So he wanted to do a small deposit on this one in case he had to back out. He didn't want a lot of money tied up. And I went, wow, thanks for sharing. And called my seller and said, we are going to counter on the deposit alone. We countered on the deposit. That buyer walked. And yet I think I saved my clients a headache, or avoiding a headache, because like we just talked about, had that buyer decided to walk, we would have gone back on market at no fault of seller, most likely. And we still would have been in a bad spot because we would have been showing us back on market. Anytime you go back on market, your listing is going to show differently. It's not going to show as a new listing. It's not going to show as a price reduction unless you do one. It's going to show as back on market. Now, there's pros and cons to that. We'll talk about that here in a little bit when it comes to tips for the winter market. But from a seller side, you want to avoid that back on market category any chance you can. If you remember back to our last call, we talked about we don't want to go active on the market with a listing unless we have to, because if you go active too early, your options are temporary withdrawn or release it. Well, we don't want to release it because then they're going to get called by every agent under the sun that targets expired and released listings. And if you go temporary withdrawn, when you make it active again, it goes to back on market. It's not a new listing anymore. So there's cons there if you have to do that. Now, another thing you can look for in the offer to make sure it is strong is loan type. Now, you cannot, as a seller, deny an offer based on loan type. However, you as an agent can have a conversation with your seller about what each loan type entails. Now, you may say, why would I do that if we're not allowed to decline based on it? Because you're setting expectations. You should let them know that an FHA or a VA appraisal is going to be more involved than a conventional appraisal. If they're putting less than 20% down, there's going to be an appraisal, period. If there's an FHA or VA loan, there's going to be an appraisal anyways. But if it's a conventional loan with 20% or more down, they may be able to waive an appraisal. That's a question you can ask the lender, which would be the opposite of a red flag. That's a green flag. That's a good thing. So loan type can play a factor in what you're looking for. This will also point in the direction of that cash conversation we talked about. If you see FHA loan or even conventional loan and it says 98% or 97.5% finance, that tells me they're only putting 3.5% down, or 97% would be 3% down. 96.5 would be 3.5% down. Or if it says 100%, that means they're getting 100% financing. Not that you can deny the offer based on that, but you should at least be aware of it. Couple of other red flags or orange flags that you should look for in an offer would be inspection timeline. If they have like 15 to 20 days or longer, that's usually a concern. The average is 7 to 14 days, 14 being obviously the long end of that. A very long or distant close date can be a concern. So if they put an offer in for 12/1 and they ask for a March 1st close, that's a little concerning. We might ask why. And then lastly would be the other language in the contract that are timelines. So your HOA timeline, if they put something really long in there. Obviously, the typical is 3 days. If they put like 10 days, you might say, why are you asking for longer time to review the HOA document? That's concerning. Same thing with like septic or termite or well. If they're asking for a ridiculous amount or not necessarily timeline, excuse me, on those sort of things, but if they're asking for like seller to credit anything up to $50,000 or $10,000 or $20,000, you might say, oh, what's going on here? So those are a couple of things, but the big one being deposit amount financed, which would lead to having conversations with the lender, and then lengthy inspection timelines. Now, sometimes there is nothing you can do. The deal falls apart and you have to go back on market. That is okay. You should set expectations with your seller that traffic or views may be a little bit slower. Some of your options include reducing the price, releasing the listing and relisting it as a new listing, or giving some sort of extra incentive, like a seller credit and advertising that. Remember, there's rules on how and what you can do to advertise that credit. I would not put it in the MLS, although you can say with an accepted offer, seller offer, blank concessions, although be aware of what you can and can't put and check with Catherine before you do it. I don't want any of you to get fined. The other thing that you can do is put signs up at the house. So, like if you're doing an open house, having little QR codes or little flyers around the house saying $5,000 closing cost credit given with an accepted offer is totally fine. And then offering things like a home warranty or something like that on the property too. Some of those things can go a long way. Questions, thoughts, comments, concerns on what to do to avoid going back on the market with the listing?
Question: if the
Yes.
offer fell through or because of a home inspection with a 7-day void, so when you relist it, would you be able to advertise that you can share the home inspection report? Is there
If
anything?
your sellers give you permission.
Okay.
Yep.
And if this is the case, would you be able, I guess, to negotiate with the new buyers, or is there anything else that you can do to avoid another home inspection?
Uh, that's a sticky area because the buyer is still allowed to do their own home inspection no matter what. Now, what you can do is by offering that home inspection report and hopefully giving them some sort of update as to what the sellers are willing to fix or credit for, et cetera, that can sometimes make a buyer feel comfortable enough to waive inspection. Sometimes.
Okay.
If I'm representing a buyer, I'm telling them 10 out of 10 times, get your own home inspection. Actually, let me rephrase that. 9.5 out of 10 times. The only time I might not would be if it's the inspection company I use, because I can personally call those cell phones and ask about the property. Um, Not that this is a pitch to that, because we have our own preferred people in the office that you guys should use, but I've been using the same inspection company for 7 years. The owner is a good friend of mine, as are most of the inspectors. I have a very good relationship with them. I've done hundreds of home inspections with them. So if I see the report, I know what I'm looking at. That's not to say that they're better or worse than any inspection company out there. I'm just used to them. It'd be the same thing with a contractor. If my roofer, the roofer I use, looks at the roof, I'm going to take their word for it because it's the same people I would call for my personal house. Same thing with like a Hickman's termite. That's who I use for termite and pest control. So if they look at it or if they do the termite report, I'm going to believe them because that's who I'm used to using. And I tell my clients that I'm like, this is the person I call and use on my own personal house. So that's what I'm going to probably recommend. That's also going to be the word I'm going to take. It will happen, especially in this market, as the market begins to shift. You're seeing more contract fallout happen. I like to say that's where we earn our commission. A friend of mine who's in the industry says the reason why we get paid or can get paid as much as we get paid is because we are apt or equipped to handle the headaches that come from this business. That includes the emotional highs and lows. I was very stressed last week dealing with 4 different deals at the same time, all of which were seemingly going awry. Well, three out of 4. One of them's been easy, and that's the $260,000 condo. The other ones that are all in the upper fives have been headaches. And I thought I was losing all 3 at the same time. I was very stressed last week. And I had a conversation with said friend. And that's when he told me, again, for the 30th time this year, this is why we do what we do. Because you are the expert to help guide them through the process. Now, that being said, because there's a lot of fallout right now, that is number one strategy, and maybe number 1A, 1B strategy for tips of winning in the winter market. You should be targeting back on market listings when you're working with buyers because those sellers are very motivated, especially if A, they've already moved out, or B, they already have a place where they want to go to next and they're just waiting to move out. These are opportunities to get a deal for your buyer. Now, a deal may be list price and ask for closing costs, or it might even be a little bit above list price, but you're getting closing costs. Cash credits are more impactful for buyers now than ever before because they can do things like buy the interest rate down or invest that cash that they're saving and make more money. I have a buyer right now doing that. They're putting less money down than they had originally planned because they're taking the difference and investing it. And that's going to actually make them more money projected than what the savings and the payment would have been if they had put the extra 5% down on the house. These are conversations that you can have with your clients. The other thing that you can do is partner with a financial advisor to then have a strong referral. I promise you will get referrals in return. Go back and watch the YouTube video on working with financial advisors. They are working with high net worth individuals, which are great referrals, both to and from. Every single one of my sellers that I meet with now gets asked the question, do you have a financial advisor you're currently working with? Yes or no? If they say yes, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate them? If it's anything below a 7, I ask for if they would be open to a second opinion. If it's above a 7, I ask for an introduction. If they say no, I say, I'd like to refer you to one. They might say, why? And I will say, because sometimes it makes more sense to invest some of your equity when you sell your house rather than throw it all into the next house. And I partner with a few financial advisors who understand this philosophy and believe the same way I do. And we can collectively come to the best fit or jigsaw puzzle or whatever analogy you want to use there for you and your situation. I had another client this summer sell their house, and instead of putting all of their equity into a new house, they put their equity into 2 houses. They bought one house, put the least amount of money down they could to still be okay with the payment, and used the leftover amount to buy a rental property. Now they're cash flowing on the rental property, positive. They're making like $300 a month. They have a depreciating asset that they can write off on their taxes, and they're okay with the payment on the new house. And actually, they didn't even use a financial advisor. I just helped them with that myself. Should have gotten paid double. Just kidding. Now, so tip number 1, look at back on market. That same thing goes for price decrease. Back on market or price decrease homes are the number 1 opportunity for buyers. Matter of fact, some of this is still left over from when we were in the COVID times. And yet when I work with a buyer, I tell them that regardless of time of year, that's where the deals are found. We look at days on market at 10 days or longer. We look at back on markets, and we look at price decreases. That's where your biggest opportunity is. It's not to say we're going to ignore the new listings, but if you want to avoid a bidding war, avoid competition, and get the best favorable terms as a buyer, that's where you need to be looking. 10 days or more days on market, probably closer to like 14 or 15 days or more. Get through 2 weekends or more. Back on market listings and price decrease listings. The other way to win when you're working with buyers in this winter market is explaining to them, A, what we just talked about, and B, some of these incentives that are going on in the market. Now, when I say explain to them, if you don't have any buyers right now, what I would be doing daily, if not weekly, is going to new construction neighborhoods and doing a social media video about what they're offering with incentives. For example, this D.R. Horton home in Magnolia Green is offering 4.99% interest rate. They're also giving you $20,000 in incentives or closing cost help. By the way, did you know as a realtor that I can help you buy new construction or build your dream home? Let's chat. And then you do a quick video walkthrough of the house. Show how nice it is. This can be for townhouses. This can be for single family homes. You can do it in the model home. You can do it in the spec home. That would be like strategy number 1 at the top of my list right now, because builders are throwing the kitchen sink at people because they're trying to get their inventory sold so that they can go build more houses. And they want to get it under contract before year's end, especially site agents, because that's how their bonuses work. Also, on some of those back on market or price decrease listings, you can get a higher compensation amount. Not that that's why we do what we do. And yet, the more motivated the seller is, again, the more favorable terms we can get. Same thing with builders. You will see some builders offer 3% commission this time of year instead of 2.5%. So be aware of those incentives. Now, don't put that incentive on the video. That's for you. That's not for the buyers. Questions or thoughts on the buyer side of tips for the market? Cool. Seller side, a little bit different. We know that the buyer volume drops off in the winter months. However, it is the most, this is something you could also use in a social media post. It is the most affordable time to buy a house right now in the last 2.5 years. 2.5 years, it is the best time to buy a house right now. Now, that sounds like a buyer pitch, and yet it's also for sellers that are sitting on the fence. Loan applications last month were up 30%, in large part due to the media talking about the rate cuts. And yet, if it's more affordable to buy a house in the last 2.5 years, more people are applying for a loan by 30%. That tells me as a seller, ooh, there's buyers out there. Also, there's less competition on the market as a seller. If I wait till the spring, there's going to be more homes available for sale, which means buyers are going to have more options to choose from, which means they might not choose my house. So yes, there are more buyers in the spring. There's also more sellers. So you're dealing with more competition from the seller side. That's how you create urgency with the seller now. Point B or 2 to that is if your seller has to buy, they can get a deal on the buyer side as well. So if they're selling and buying, they're going to end up, they might sell for a little bit more in the spring, but they're going to end up paying more on the buyer side too, because we just talked about the competition. Whereas right now, they may be able to sell at a little bit lower of a price, but they can also buy a little bit lower of a price. And that's what we care more about, is where you're going next, because that's the payment you're going to be living in. So if we can save money on the buy side, it's typically a bigger win versus making a little bit more on the sales side. That's another social media video, by the way. The reason why I pitch video so much is it's a way for you to not only speak one to many or one to a larger audience, instead of having this conversation individually, it also showcases your expertise to your social media. So even if they're not thinking about making a move, you're going to stay top of mind by giving them this type of advice. And it's not a look at what I just sold post, or look at my new listing, or come see me at the open house. Not that we don't do those. However, video giving tips to win in the winter market, or showing what's available for sale, or showing what price points buy in different parts of Richmond is going to go a lot further. You're giving value there. Now, another tip for sellers is offer incentives like we talked about before. Doing more marketing, whether that be additional open houses like during the week. Don't just do a Saturday and a Sunday. That doesn't really vary things up that much. Pick one of those days and then pick a Tuesday afternoon or a Wednesday evening. Yes, you're going to get less traffic. However, it's going to expose it to a different type of market. There are some buyers and agents, myself included, who are very busy on the weekends. So sometimes we can't get to open houses. And then if we think the house is going to sell fast and we see an open house and we can't get to it, we cross that home off the list and we don't go back to it. So if you list a new house on a Monday or a Tuesday, don't be afraid to try a Thursday or a Friday open house in addition to the Saturday or the Sunday open house. You're going to see a different audience. That's the point. It also is additional social media content. Everybody associates open houses with Saturday or Sunday open house afternoons. Most of the time, people associate open houses with Sunday afternoon. So if you can break that realm or break that trend, you're going to stand out more. And then make it unique. Do balloons, do food, do a food truck, do a band, do a music, do a DJ, obviously I'm giving you some quite expensive things. However, I guarantee if you go through your database, you're going to find somebody that either plays an instrument or DJs on the side, or would like to just come hang out with you. Make it different. There is no one size fits all to open houses. There are strategies we employ. However, you can be unique. I think I've talked about it on here before. There's another friend of mine in KW's world that uses a red carpet at the entrance of all of their open houses. So people walk down the red carpet as they go in. Rain or shine, they do that, by the way. And they have like those old school like velvet ropes with it too. It's pretty funny. I'll try to find a picture and send it to everybody. But they do it every single open house. And then now their marketing around the open house is look for the red carpet. So they have open house signage, et cetera. But you see a big red carpet leading into the front door. It's a pretty tall tale sign that the house is open for view. And they associate it with that brand. I have another friend of mine, every single listing that they use, they light a certain scent of candle. This agent has like 30 or 40% market share in her little bubble where she works. So people can walk into a listing and smell that candle scent and automatically know it's her listing because it's the same candle scent every single time. And it's something like leather bourbon. It's like a very specific scent. And she's in California. So that kind of becomes synonymous with your brand. All right. I want to hear some feedback. What are some other things you guys are seeing in the market right now? Buyer, seller, objections, feedback. What are they telling you? I have a few where they're sitting on the fence. What I just gave you is kind of number one responses as to why or how we overcome those. Success stories or case studies are the best way to get people to overcome those objections. It does create a little bit of FOMO in their brain. I'll use another quick story while y'all think too about that. So I have a buyer, first time home buyer, looked at a couple of houses, was ready to put an offer on one, got cold feet, never signed the offer. Found another house they liked more. Husband signed the offer, wife never signed the offer. 3 days went by, wife got cold feet, decided not to wait. Then they were like, we're just going to wait till the spring. And I said, okay. Well, fast forward a couple of weeks, I actually looked at that same house with a different buyer, told this original buyer, hey, I actually looked at the house on Studley again. I thought about you guys. They mentioned a point that I didn't think about. Are you okay with blah, 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 blah? Or would you be more interested in a house that had a cul-de-sac or had a street that you could walk the dogs on, et cetera? And the husband actually answered me and was like, oh, we never really thought about that. But that is good to think about moving forward. 2 days later, he texted me a house he wanted to go look at. And he goes, sorry, we're so hot and cold, but we realized like once you told us somebody else looked at the house, we don't want to lose a house that we see that we like by waiting. By the way, the house that he asked me to look at sold before they could see it. So I reminded him, hey, when under contract, buyers are still making moves right now. We don't have weeks or multiple days to sit and think about whether we're interested in a house or not. And yet, I shared with him, you can probably still get closing costs. My folks that looked at the house that he was interested in, they ended up buying something else, but we're getting $10,000 from the seller. And I told them that. I said, hey, they ended up buying something that was a little bit more expensive, but they're getting $10,000 back from the seller. Would you like to get $10,000 when you buy a house? He's like, yeah, I would. I'm like, all right, well, don't wait till the spring, especially if rates continue trending down. You're not going to get $10,000 in the spring. You're going to get $10,000 now. Best case, you might get 5 in the spring, or you're going to have to add it into the sales price. You're basically financing the difference. So sharing that with your prospective buyers or wins is a good strategy. You can also get used to saying we, W-E, and refer to people that are on this call or that are in Keller Williams. And say, people on my team. The public doesn't understand the difference. Now, you're not manipulating them. You're giving them information by saying, hey, an agent on my team was talking today in our meeting about how he just helped a buyer get $10,000 in credits from the seller. It got me thinking about you. We should look sooner because you could do a lot with that $10,000, such as break your lease early. Another way of saying that is if you have a buyer that's renting maybe till like May or June, and they're like, we just want to wait till our lease ends. You could say, okay, great, no problem. Occasionally we come across deals in this market. If I found a house that checks all your boxes and the seller was willing to pay for you to get out of your lease early, would you be interested? If they say no, say you're crazy. Just kidding. They almost always will say, yes, of course. I didn't know that was possible. And you can explain to them. Agent on my team just said on this call that he helped the buyer get $10,000 from the seller. To get out of your lease early is going to cost you $4,000. That means you would have $6,000 left over to spend on your closing costs. And the seller paid for you to get out of your lease early. You can also remind them, by the way, did you know when you close on a house, you actually skip a month before your first payment's due? So when people say, well, I got to give 60 days notice for a lease, you say, that's easy. Because as soon as we get past the inspection, we know you're moving forward, we'll give the 60 days notice. And you will still be before your mortgage payment's due. For example, I put a house on a contract today, December 1st. We do the inspection Friday. The inspection goes well. We know we're moving forward. Monday or Tuesday of next week, what is that? The 8th or the 9th of December, I tell my landlord, hey, I'm going to be out by February 9th. That's 60 days notice. If I close in December or in January on that new house, my first mortgage payment's due March 1st. I don't have two payments on anything. And you should lay that out for your clients. Fair, you got a question? Go ahead.
Hey, good morning. I was trying to understand, how does the $10,000 credit work in this scenario? Is it that they're offering the credit and then rather than applying it to the home purchase price, they're taking it out at closing? Or how does that work?
So it works by basically you're saving cash. So you're going to have those closing costs anyway. So if closing costs is 3% of the purchase price, which is about the average, maybe 3.5%, depending on the loan type, you're saying, hey, instead of you having to bring that 3.5% to closing, you now bring that minus $10,000. So you save that money. So technically they're still paying their lease break fee, but the seller gave them money to reimburse them.
Okay, got it. So you're getting $10,000 in closing cost assistance.
Yep.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And the terms that no problem. That's a great question. The terms that I use when I'm working with buyers, I've stopped saying down payment and closing costs. I refer to it as cash to close because that's what a lender is going to say. Now, your cash to close is your down payment plus your closing costs minus any credits you're getting. It's also minus the earnest money deposit because you put that down up front. So when people say, I have 50 grand down payment, I say, okay, do you have 50 grand down payment plus closing costs, or you have 50 grand cash to close? And they go, what's the difference? And then you can explain it to them. And you can say, now my goal is to get as many seller credits as we possibly can. This is a tip for any market, not necessarily a winter market, but when I'm working with buyers, I tell them, especially first-time home buyers, I tell them, put the least amount of cash down that you can where you're still okay with the payment. And they go, what? I thought I was supposed to put 20% down because I don't want PMI. And I say, to heck with PMI. Because if you're okay with the payment, who cares? Multiple reasons why. Number one, you're probably going to refinance before you move based on rates coming down or your value going up. Just for sake of easy math, if the sales price goes up 5% every year, it's probably going to be 4 to 5% the next couple of years. Let's call it 4%. In 5 years, you've gone up 20% in value. You can refinance and drop the PMI off if you put no money down, as long as you make your mortgage payments on time. So people will probably refinance PMI off within 5 years. That's assuming rates don't change. If rates change, you may refinance sooner. And so keep that cash in hand. You can do the things like we talked about earlier, invest it, or just sit on it. Put it in savings. If they don't want to invest, that's okay. That's not your role. That's not your lane to run in. Have them sit on it. I have a buyer doing this right now. She got a second quote from a lender. It was like, oh, this lender is giving us such a good interest rate. I'm like, no, she's not. She's charging you $16,000 for it. $8,000 finance and $8,000 cash to close. She's just buying down your rate with your money, which anybody can do. If you really want that lower payment, put more money down. But I wouldn't recommend it. If you're okay with the higher payment, keep the cash, invest it. Typically, you can get a better return investing it than you can the savings and payments anyways, especially if you're planning on refinancing. Even if you aren't planning on refinancing, because sometimes that costs money, you could also sell your house. The average homeowner moves every 7 to 9 years. It used to be 5 to 7 years. People are staying in their house longer. However, in large part due to interest rates. If interest rates come down, you'll start seeing people move sooner. But call it 7 years for easy math. If you're going to be moving in 7 years anyways, we're not paying off the loan. So be okay with the payment and keep the cash on hand. Last little tip with that piece too. I've talked about this before. I have a YouTube video about it. This will help you with buyers, getting them off the fence, and with sellers that sell and buy. There's a concept called blended rate. Now, what blended rate refers to, is all the debt you have, credit cards, car payment, student loans, house. All of those rates, some of them are much higher than others. If you were to take a weighted average of them, and don't ask me how to do that because that's a math problem. If you were to take a weighted average of all those debts that you have, the blended rate is that weighted average. Now, there's a difference from one of those compared to the rest, and that is your house, because your house goes up in value. The rest of them are going down in value or carry no value at all, such as a student loan or a credit card. You can lower your blended rate by a lot more by paying off those higher interest rates. This is also known as a snowball effect. If you have 4 credit cards and you want to get out of debt or credit card debt, you pay off the highest interest balance first. You don't pay off the highest balance first. You pay off the highest interest balance first. Then you take that monthly required payment and you roll it onto the next one. And you pay off that next highest interest rate. Then the next one, then the next one. Now you're credit card debt free. You could do the same thing with down payment or equity from a sale by saying put the least amount down on the house that you're comfortable with and use the leftover amount to pay off other debt. Your total out of pocket monthly will actually be pretty close to the same, especially if you're going from like selling a 2 or 3% interest rate to buying a 6% interest rate. I'm okay with doing that if I pay off my 27.99% interest credit card and my 9.99% interest car payment. Because now I'm saving $1,000 a month on debt that wasn't accumulating any value. And I can use that extra $1,000 a month to pay the difference in my house going up. And I'm in the house I want. We should be educating our clients on how to do that. I use this conversation on every single client I worked with in the spring. Every single one had that conversation. Not that we don't do it anymore, but it was very applicable in the spring when rates were 7.5%, 8%. A lot of experts are projecting that 6% is that kind of like fence mover, for lack of a better word, whereas once rates get below 6%, more people are going to come off the fence and willing to make a move. You should be telling your audience that, and you should be telling them that it's possible to get below a 6% right now. And it's possible to do it with the seller paying for it, such as that credit I said earlier. Let's use the lease break conversation again. You're getting 10 grand from the seller, $4,000 buys out of your lease. The $6,000 left over buys down your interest rate. Now you have a 5.85 or 5.875 instead of 6.3 or whatever it is. There are strategies you can work with there. All right, feedback. Anything else? Any questions, comments? What are you hearing from your clients? We're done a little bit early today, but that's okay. Was this helpful? You can nod if you want to come off mute.
Yes, very much so.
That's very much.
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. All right. So, a couple other logistic things before we wrap up. Tomorrow's the vendor fair. If you haven't RSVP'd already, please do and please go. It should be a good time. We have a lot of vendors coming. We're doing free headshots, a lot of food. It's from Wegmans, so you know it'll be good. All you Northeast fans in here. And then next week is the Christmas party, the holiday party. I'm not supposed to call it a Christmas party, the holiday party. That will be a good time too. We'll be at both of them. Those are in lieu of team meetings. Remember, we do not have our Friday meetings anymore. We're doing these instead because so many more of you show up to this, and that was what the vote was, and I appreciate that. I am available now for one-on-ones as needed. If you're in track 2, you get it anyways. Katrin, we need to set up ours.
Yes.
Rhonda, we can set up ours as well because you two are in track 2. And
I'm
then
so
everybody
glad
else
you
is
said
happy
that
to
because
stuff.
I was about to ask that question.
Yeah. So you two text me. We'll set up a time, and it can vary week to week, or we can set up a reoccurring one. The rest of you, obviously, keep showing up to the things we're doing. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the YouTube playlist. There's about to be a lot more videos coming up on that once I start uploading those. We're also going to add it to the Google Drive, the Six Figures by Design Google Drive. In the recap email, I'll send a link to that to make sure you all have it. But I'm going to do a separate folder in there that's going to be how-to resource videos. And then last but not least, if you have already logged on the MLS today, you would have seen it. However, there's a couple of virtual on-demand trainings coming up in the next couple of weeks, such as the orientation and ethics and road to rules courses, which are required. Please go take them. Do the on-demand or do the virtual ones. They are very good. It will help you with a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff for what the MLS technology is. Even if you've already done it, I would recommend doing it again because it's free. And by free, I mean you pay for it in your MLS dues. And those are helpful. Okay, I think that's all I have.
Austin, who are the vendors coming tomorrow? Can you give us
Great question. There's like 16 of them.
Awesome.
There's a home restoration company coming. There's a photographer coming. Warranty will be there. Handyman services, declutter services. Which I'm going off memory here. Roofer, I think. Termite inspection. There's a lot. There's like 15 or 16 vendors, I think.
Awesome.
So yeah, so it should be a good time. And even if you just come get a new updated headshot. I have a joke where I say realtors should be required to update their headshot every year because I don't like seeing headshots from the 1990s and being like, look, anything like that. But anyways, and it's free. So come get a couple of headshots. Yeah, tomorrow at 11. Hope to see you there.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.